Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local. Welcome everybody to the Near Memo, episode 122, where we talk about all things local. And today is another all Google episode. So we're going to dive right in, and we're going to talk about the new Google ad unit.
Before we do, I just want to point out that if you're watching this video and you don't see any sparkle in Greg's eye, it's because he just got back from Las Vegas. So, just saying.
I'm tired. Yes, I was at a conference. I was at the Milestone Internet Marketing Conference, and I did a presentation on consumer behavior and banking for local marketers, and then one on sort of the holistic direction of Google and local. And I'm used up. But not so used up that I can't do this podcast. Anyway, so here we are again, coming again. So the three of us are here to talk about all things local. David's going to talk about a new Google ad unit, local ad unit. Mike's going to talk about some new GBP policies and guidelines, which seem to clarify things, but maybe not entirely. And I'm going to talk about the I was going to say the return, but the emergence or the inclusion of links in Google SGE, which is a really important development. So, David, why don't you take it away?
Sure. So I'm sorry to steal Mike's thunder, but he wanted to talk about the new guidelines. So Mike is actually the one who discovered this ad unit, and it apparently was new even to Barry Schwartz. So
that's a rare event.
That's how we can actually identify that it does seem to be a new ad unit. This is I have only seen this ad unit on mobile. I've not been able to replicate this on the desktop. Essentially, it is a relatively horizontal ad unit that appears embedded in the traditional ad results. So this is not a pack ad or a local finder ad. It may also appear in the local finder, but this is the surface that Mike saw it on was a traditional Google mobile search result. And it's a really simple ad unit. It's essentially the business name, their ratings and reviews, volume and stars, their category, a very small map about where they're located, and some photos. And so it's pulling all of this information from the Google business profile, requires absolutely zero creative on the part of the business. Theoretically, this is part of some Performance Max local extension thing where Google is
They don't call them local extensions anymore. They call them local assets.
Local assets, where Google is sort of choosing the keywords, which I would certainly have some reservations about as a marketer trying to optimize budget. I don't know that it still is pretty fast and loose with your dollars, I think. But from an ad creation standpoint, this is exactly the product that Google should have released over a decade ago. I think all of these features were available in Google business profiles or whatever place pages way back when, since time immemorial. And it's exactly the kind of ad unit that is compelling to users. It is essentially, reviews and photos are the two most used areas of Google business profiles. Requires no knowledge on the part of the business. It's just a really, really smart release on their part, I think. I just wish it had been around a long time ago. The irony is that because the new, what's it called? I don't know, the insert GBP editing experience, whatever that's called, NMX.
NMX, new merchant experience.
But that's not Google's term. That's
that is Google's
right?
term. That's their
Google's term. Yeah.
And they're using NMX.
Since the advent of NMX, it has become much, much, much more difficult to actually manage your photos. There was some indication that they've actually released a way to do this now, which is like a hybrid of the dashboard within the NMX experience.
That's always been there. If you had multiple locations and you clicked on the image, it would take you to that dashboard editing environment. But you had to have multiple locations. You had to know to click on the image. So the only person who ever did it was me, because I click everywhere, right? So
right. Anyway, it has been since the advent of the NMX, it has historically been a cluster to manage images. It's becoming less so. So one would hope that this is I hope for the sake of business owners, this is a very effective ad unit. It certainly seems to me to be that as a prospective searcher, and it makes it really easy for a business who needs additional exposure to get that from Google. So I'm pretty interested to see if Google does release any specific data around how effective these new units are.
Well, it won't be for a while, at least if they do it all. I mean, the analogy I think of is to LSAs, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Which are quite a bit more effective than traditional Google ads. And in our user testing, we saw that people explicitly said I'd avoid ads, but they very often clicked on LSAs because they didn't really look like ads. They had all this additional information similar to what you're describing about the new unit.
Yeah, I think in some respects, so the LSAs have these Google guarantees or Google verified language, which is part of what Google Screen. Sorry, thank you. Part of what's appealing to people is sort of the novelty of that. I think that this looks more like a math
traditional
ad, to be honest. Yeah. So I think it may not quite have the same cachet, but agreed. I think it's if the user is able to, the searcher is able to recognize the pin in the map, for example, and might even recognize the brand name, right? If it's a sort of suburban or rural location, I think it's a pretty compelling format and one that is likely to draw a lot of clicks. So,
well, I mean, I think that the Google screened and Google guaranteed badges certainly are trust signals to people, but nobody knows what they really mean. That's sort of the irony of all these labels that are circulating.
And like every Google process, they've been spammed and misused, and Google has very little quality control, even though initially they tried to implement, more. They've let the quality control down, and so they don't really even mean what they say they mean at some level because they've been spammed. And so there's fake locations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Fake reviews.
In that sense, the term Google screened is still accurate, right? It's screened as well as Google screens anything. So
you're right, but there is a certain deceptive advertising aspect to that one would think that consumers aren't aware of.
Yeah, definitely. And, I always thought that the FTC could go after Google because Google is making representations about the accuracy or the trustworthiness or the veracity of the listing and its claims. And, with the spam in there, we don't know what the precise numbers are, but there's a lot of it that sort of goes beyond third-party user-generated content, but so far there hasn't been any action on that. So anything more on that item, David, before we go to Mike?
Nope.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.